It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Hope everyone had a good Labor Day weekend. For me, it's one of the important holidays for us to remember the history of what it took to build a prosperous working class, the history of what it took to fight for the 8-hour day, for weekends, vacations, days off when you, might be able to spend a little time with the family. Back when, that seemed to happen. Now, sadly, a lot of people I spoke to didn't get the holiday off. Seems like we're breaking that. Thank you, Amazon. This is where I'm hoping people eventually wake up after these kind of moments and say things need to change. Now, our president on Labor Day was in his home state of Delaware, meeting with union members, actually brought sandwiches and called one guy's mom just to say, hey, how you doing? I got to tell you, I love Joe Biden in the White House in these moments. And I give him credit for a lot of things at this point. We've got a lot more work to do. But I give him credit. Here's somebody who knows he knows how to work a line, man. I give him credit for that. On Tuesday, he reached out in New York, saying, "Look, the incredible danger, the incredible damage that was done after Hurricane Ida, according to him, and I don't disagree, shows the nation and the world that we're in peril. Climate change is here. It's real. It's happening right before our very eyes." He said, quote, "Climate change poses an existential threat to our lives, our economy, and the threat is here." He says it's not going to get any better. The question is, can it get worse? Yeah, it can get a lot worse and a lot more costly. The White House the same day put out an urgent request for funding of $14 billion to help rebuild the areas that were affected in New York and New Jersey. Again, got to get that in quick because October 1st, there's potentially a government shutdown going to happen because they won't raise the debt ceiling. I don't see that happening. But it's one of those things where you go, we got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen, a lot of things that have to get done. Got to have money to do that, which is why I'm glad to see Speaker Pelosi, in a nice way, responding to Joe Manchin's strategic pause on the $3.5 trillion investment in our human infrastructure. I give her credit, man. Good jab in there, saying, look, she goes, I don't agree. Obviously, don't agree that we should pause this. We need to move forward. She said the numbers, 3.5 trillion. We can't go above that, she said. And when asked, what's the likelihood of, going below, she goes, why? Why would we? And this is one of those things where you go, why? Right now, we need the investment, and we need it desperately. We need desperately to rebuild our manufacturing base. And, today was one of those moments for me where, again, you're in this, we're in our daily lives and we're treading along and we're trying to make ends meet. And, I look at, my situation, my Jeep Patriot blew up. It's done. So I have to go find something to replace that. And, as someone who will only buy an American-made, union-made vehicle, the numbers are getting much smaller. When I bought my Patriot back in 2011, it was built in Illinois by UAW members. It was a good deal. It was a good car. It's lasted me 10 years. 200,000 miles. It owes me nothing. I have run that thing till it blew up. And we are still considering dropping a motor in it to give to my son, but that's down the road. Need something reliable, need something now. So I went and I spent the day looking around, going, okay, it's been 10 years since I've looked for a vehicle for myself. It's been 10 years, and I'm going, well, let's find out what's out there. There's an opportunity to, see some new things, maybe, find something that I really like. So I figured I like the Patriot. Let's see if they still make that. Well, they canceled that. They replaced that with the Renegade. The Renegade that's made in Mexico now. And so I looked, okay, Compass, because the Compass is supposed to be the Jeep Compass, next step up. That also moved to Mexico along with the Patriot so that they could move the Cherokee from Toledo to Belvedere, Illinois, where my Patriot and, of course, the Compass were manufactured. So you go, well, what happened? What's going on in Toledo? Well, Toledo, they still make the Wrangler, and the Wrangler Unlimited, and this Jeep Gladiator, this hybrid, half truck, half Jeep, kind of weird. My son hates it, but even still, way over my head, because the Wranglers were topping at around $75,000, and I'm going, the things that I did find, the costs were just wow. You go, does no one in the U.S. make a working class vehicle anymore? The car before I bought the Jeep, because my Jeep, I loved my Jeep, loved it. Roll down windows, manual locks, stick shift. It was perfect, absolutely perfect for me, because I'm someone who believes that a car is to get to work and back. I'm very utilitarian in that way. Now my wife, on the other hand, lots of bells and whistles, heated cup holders, vibrating seats, you name it. If it flashes or dings or moves or does anything, gotta have it. And I'm okay with that. But for me, I just want something pretty simple. We evidently don't make that anymore. So I started looking around at other things. Like my wife had a Grand Caravan that I really liked. Thought of that. It's made in Canada. And I go, well, okay, I'm looking for American made. I'd like something here. I'd like to support the jobs here at home. Now my wife's Charger, perfect example. My wife's Charger, made in Canada. The only way I could justify buying the Charger was, they're UAW members. It is Canada. They're our friends. I get that. But an American muscle car like the Charger, the only way you can get it is in Canada? And you go, have we really depleted our manufacturing capacity here that much that the American muscle of yesteryear, we have to go to Canada to build? And look, I love my Canadian friends. I'm struggling. And, I went through all of these different cars. We went to the Fords, and I loved the Fords. The first one I looked at was the Bronco. Going, iconic. The Ford Bronco. They brought it back. Yes. Drove it. Loved it. Loved the Bronco. Check the VIN number. Made in Mexico. How is it? How is it the Bronco's made in Mexico? The only thing that was left was the EcoSport, which was the little compact SUV kind of thing, made in Brazil. Then there was the Escape, which is manufactured, put together here in the U.S., but with Chinese parts. And I'm going, am I losing something? Am I missing something? And if you want to look at the lower end of the scale, you wanted to get some of the cheaper cars, the small, subcompacts, the mid-size, the little ones and the little bit bigger ones. They're all made in Korea. And you go, what exactly happened to the American manufacturing mentality? And I know the first person's going to go, well, it's those UAW members who make too much money. Nonsense. Nonsense. They made these iconic cars for generations in UAW plants with higher wages than they make now. So this idea that, it's all this nonsense. It has to do everything to do with the profit margins, the bottom line. We were in the one Ford dealer, and they had a 1917 Model T. And it got me thinking about Henry Ford and the assembly line and how we want to make cars affordable enough so that the working class can buy them. We want to make sure that they're affordable enough that workers can buy them. And I'm sorry, as much as I love the Jeep Wranglers, I am never paying $75,000 for a car. That ain't happening. And I don't know any working class person who can. But I'm looking at this Model T and I'm going, wow, look at this thing. They had a sticker on it. I think it was like $325 for the car. back in 1917. So I got on the phone, I quick checked the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, and go, today that car costs $7,500. You go, how is it they were able to manufacture that while paying double the wage of everybody else and still be? And you go back to, and look, Henry Ford was no poor guy. How much money is being bled off into the hands of the shareholders and the wealth class? It's crazy. In our healthcare system. So, as I'm looking at this stuff, I'm going, how is it we're going to be able to keep these things going? Now, understand, some of the people are saying, well, we can't get any inventory in. And understand, there's no basic anything. As I said at the beginning, I'm someone who, if you give me crank windows and manual locks, I'm happy as can be. If it's got 2 speeds for the air conditioning, I'm okay. That's just me, and I know sounds very curmudgeon-y, but look, I'm a utilitarian. That's my mindset. I want to go back and forth. That's it. I want it reliable. I want it in decent shape. But you start talking to some of these folks. Well, they blame it on, it's the chips. We can't get inventory. And you go, well, how many of these basic vehicles do you ever get? Well, none, because they're not making any. When I bought my F-150, roll down windows, manual lock, stick shift, bench seat, extremely affordable. Truck lasted me 17 years. Well worth it. I went and looked at trucks today, $45,000, $50,000, and I'm going, I love them. They're incredible, but it's kind of much. And you go, why is it? And it comes back to the priorities of our manufacturing and how trade in this country has completely screwed things up. The idea that we allowed the auto industry in the 60s to start moving production overseas and then bringing things back under the argument we're domestic production, domestic consumption, which I am in favor of. Back in the 90s when they were saying GM was going to build a $2 billion manufacturing plant in China, I said, those cars are coming back here because nobody there can afford them. And if they can't afford them here, it's going to kill everything here. So it's never going to happen. They're just going to keep dumping and, of course, profiting. This is about profit more than anything. So as they're moving production overseas and more jobs are being lost and we have this spiraling down. Look, had wages kept up with car inflation, you could afford one. And I feel for the people who don't have the ability. Look, I could probably buy one if I wanted to. And as I told my wife, I don't want to buy a $50,000 car. I can, but I don't want to. And the more I look at this, the more I go, our trade deals have screwed this up because the auto industry is not interested in making, small and mid-sized cars for working people. They want to cash in on the big stuff. And that's always been the knock. And it's always where I think we've had problems. It's because we don't encourage manufacturing in this country. We talk about it. We need to bring back manufacturing. We continually are losing jobs. I came across this little stat because, everyone looks at Reagan and says, no, Reagan was the greatest president, increased jobs. No, manufacturing jobs he continually lost because of his high dollar policy that allowed imports to come in at a much cheaper rate and didn't bother putting tariffs on them. And then, of course, his birthing of the idea of NAFTA and George H.W. Bush's, pushing all the way through and Clinton signing it put us in a spot where now you're talking NAFTA, you're talking PNTR, permanent normal trade relations with China, and we're just getting killed. And then, of course, Obama threw in Korea and in chorus and all of that. And what's happened is we've allowed the bottom of the auto industry to be taken over by the parts of the company that are just out there seeking the most profit, the most exploitable labor, the most exploitable working conditions. And they're not even that cheap either. So like I said, I'm in this weird spot because I'm going to buy something at some point. And it's getting a lot harder. It's getting a lot harder to find union-made, American-made anything. And this is where I give Joe Biden credit. He's talking about, how do we rebuild our manufacturing? How do we have a 40-year reset? And this is all of my complaining aside. What I want is, I want that 40-year reset. I want things to return to some bit of normalcy for working class people, to where they're not only tied into, well, I have to buy this Korean thing or this car from China or from wherever. That I, the working person, can buy that vehicle that my hands touched. I can buy the car that I helped build, help put parts into, help deliver, help do all the things that Henry Ford said, you know what, if we're going to make a product, I want to make sure my people can buy them. Now, that doesn't make him some, great humanitarian. He wasn't. Makes him a good businessman. Makes him someone who goes, yeah, I should want my people buying their products. I should want people signing up and saying, yes, we most certainly want to buy what we produce. But during the Reagan years, and I came across this little statistic that just grabbed me. Employment increased by 2.6%, from 104.5 million to 107.2 million jobs across the economy. But manufacturing fell from 20 million down to 16.8 million, a 15.9% drop. You're talking massive drop in manufacturing capacity. And we saw a big drop during the Clinton era, and a massive drop during the W. Bush years, and a huge drop under Trump. The guy who, and this is the weird part, the guy who told us he was going to reinvigorate manufacturing, he was going to rebuild those towns like Lordstown, Ohio, where the Lordstown plant was. He was going to be the guy who was going to bring those jobs back. Didn't say how, didn't say, what the plan was. Biden's got a plan. We need massive infrastructure spending. We need to rebuild our not just our economy, but our country, and rebuild the opportunities that people had. When I was a kid, man, if you got one of those jobs at the UAW plants, you had a good life and built a good product. I'd like to see that again. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day hundreds of ILWU strikers blocked railroad tracks near Longview, Washington. They hoped to stop grain shipments from moving in and out of the EGT grain terminal. Longshoremen had been sitting down on the tracks throughout the summer, resulting in over 100 arrests. No trains had moved in or out of the terminal since July. But then a federal judge issued an injunction against ILWU pickets. The BNSF Railroad tried to move grain once again. ILWU picketers in Vancouver were able to hold off the train until police forcibly dispersed the crowd. Then, hundreds gathered at Longview to block the train from coming in. That's when police went on the offensive. They used clubs and pepper spray against the longshoremen, arresting 19. They threw ILWU President Bob McElrath to the ground. Rumors spread that police had broken his arm. Hundreds of regional longshoremen rushed to Longview. The Seattle and Tacoma ports shut down in protest. The next morning, 10,000 tons of grain were opened onto the railroad tracks. The grain export terminal was the first to be built in the Pacific Northwest in almost 30 years. EGT hoped to undercut the powerful ILWU, who controlled operations at the port since its founding in the 1930s. The union refused to agree to work 12-hour shifts at straight time. The EGT hoped to break the hiring hall by refusing to recognize maintenance and inside workers at the terminal. They then attempted to fill jobs with workers from the operating engineers, but the ILWU persevered. By the end of January, EGT had backed off many of its demands, negotiations resumed, and days later, the contract was signed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the reality is, I am happy that we're out of Afghanistan. I give Joe Biden credit for having the backbone and the spine to say we're getting out, we're not leaving this to someone else. And seriously, he could have gone, no, thump the chest, we're staying, we're going to escalate, we're going to send more people, and this could have blown back up. And I give him credit for not doing that because, look, that's what the last administration did. They came into office saying we're getting out, and we didn't get out. Same thing with the administration before that. We didn't get out. Joe Biden got us out. Whatever you think about how we got out, we're out. And now, moving forward, one, I want to hold people accountable who got us in, and then undo some of the damage that was done 20 years ago. And a big part of that for me is the Patriot Act, the Department of Homeland Security, the surveillance state that has been built around us. And here to share some thoughts on maybe how we do that, explain what a little bit of it is, and how we get rid of it. I've asked Max Burns to come talk with us. Max has got a new piece out, Forever Wars Won't End If the Surveillance State's Still Here. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So you got this piece over at the Daily Beast, which I think is the right time for this. We most certainly, out of Iraq, out of Afghanistan, we got to undo some of the damage that they did with the code green, yellow, purple, with all the codes and all the nonsense that they got away with as people were running in fear.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And a lot of Democrats and Republicans have sort of celebrated the end of the war on terror, the end of these foreign wars, but that's really only half of the war. The other half was waged in the United States with legislation, with the Department of Homeland Security, with TSA, with a whole host of surveillance policies that have not only been re-upped year after year, but have been expanded to the point where now we risk this becoming a perpetual surveillance infrastructure even after the wars it was designed to support have ended.
Yeah, do you think we ever go back, though? I mean, because look, it's become so ingrained. There are cameras everywhere. Police cars are outfitted with license plate readers, and there are companies who are doing much crazier things. Facial recognition software everywhere. All of this stuff. This is an industry now of how to spy on us, gather information for governments and for corporate America. Is there any way of closing this door, putting the genie back in the bottle?
It's tough. And I think that we knew that from the beginning. I mean, there's a reason it's the Department of Homeland Security and not the Department of the War on Terror. These things were designed to distance themselves from their reasons for existing, to ensure in a way that they would exist forever. These are organizations that have received budget boosts under Democrats and Republicans and have become such an ingrained part of life that it's the equivalent of asking Democrats to step up and cut Medicare. These things are programs that have convinced Americans in large part that they keep us safe when in fact they've largely been viewed as useless by the intelligence community for at least the last half decade.
But we feel better. And now I remember going back before the Patriot Act was passed, where I lived in Allentown, the League of Women Voters put together a panel, and it was a great discussion. They had 6 panelists, 3 people who were for it, 3 people who were against it, and the crowd was overwhelmingly in favor of passing it. And the 3 people who, let me ask you the question. If there's 6 people on a panel, 3 or 4, 3 are against, how many people you think actually read the bill?
Let's say close to 0.
3. The 3 people who were against it. The 3 people who actually read it said, no, this is horrible. This is long-term attacks on our individual liberties. This is all bad. We don't need this. And I had a woman sitting next to me jump up and go, I just want to feel safe, and I want to be able to go through the airport without anybody harassing me. I'll take real ID. I'll take fingerprints. I'll do all this stuff. And I, at the time, was, mortified. We got it all.
Yeah, and this is a situation where the government sort of acknowledges, if you read into it, if you look at investigations done by the Pentagon, reports by the NSA, that this intelligence, far from keeping us safe, has actually failed to prevent a single attack. It's failed to be used in evidence in any terrorist attack that we've stopped, and we have stopped multiple terrorist attacks since 9/11. It just happens that it was traditional intelligence gathering, traditional police work that got us there, not snooping on everyone's iPhones and tracking what you're doing online. That has largely been more of a security risk for the country than it has been a benefit.
Yeah, and to be honest, if you were snooping on people's emails and in their cell phones and all this stuff, how come you didn't stop January 6th? I mean, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
they weren't trying to hide it. Did you not read the Gab and the Parlor and the? Did you not read Parlor? It was right there. You didn't need to spy. They put it right out. They actually recorded their treason for us.
They did. And this makes the broader point of this intelligence gathering behemoth we've created that sucks up almost $1 trillion over just the past few years. Couldn't even predict the fall of Afghanistan, where the majority of our overseas intelligence operations are based. This was as useless going in as it is coming out. I mean, at no point have these intelligence agencies demonstrated that the incredibly powerful tools that they've been given to dig into Americans' private lives without court orders in many cases have provided even one piece of useful intelligence, but they certainly have weakened our expectation of privacy and our expectation of personal freedom.
No, and this is where, I feel for my kids because I grew up in an era where, you expected to have a little bit of privacy, at least in your papers and in your mind. In your own home, you had some bit of privacy. We're in this moment now where my kids don't expect to ever have a moment of thought that someone isn't having access to. And that's frightening. I mean, the world they're growing up in, what we've done is frightening.
And there are companies now that have taken this huge government support for the intelligence and surveillance industry and essentially privatized the gains of that. Silicon Valley now is awash in private intelligence companies that will help you surveil immigrants, employees, students at school, students at a university, teachers at a university, anyone you want. They can customize tools to help you monitor them more effectively. And these are companies that government is now pushing as the next big wave of innovation. So they are not prepared to step away from this. They want to double down and make this surveillance America's leading export.
No, as you pointed out, the Senate had a supermajority in passing the Patriot Act, 98-1. The House overwhelmingly, in the 400, plus to a handful. This passed overwhelmingly at the time. Do you think the tide of popularity has finally turned to where maybe overwhelmingly we can get rid of this, where you're going to have the same kind of votes? Or is this, as you've pointed out, this is the next wave of industry. This is the next wave of control mechanisms. And the politicians and the folks who have the levers are a little less thrilled about giving it up.
Well, we're starting to see some pushback. And I wish they had come out with this poll a week ago when I was writing the piece. A survey just came out today showing that for the first time, a majority of Americans have a negative view of surveillance and don't believe that it is a good trade-off to trade privacy and security rights for the illusion of better security from terrorism. Now, for you and me, that's mind-blowing. I remember in October of 2001 when 89% of Americans said they would sacrifice a significant amount of personal freedom for security. Now, 20 years on, that having been shown to be a lie, the majority of Americans are no longer willing to make that bargain. And that's at least good, makes me feel confident that we're headed in the right direction.
Well, how much of that do you think is, it's been 20 years and the focus is now people are finally realizing that they're the focus, not the Islamo-fascist terrorists that we were told they were going after, but actually us. Our phone records surveilled, our cell phones, our emails, anything you put on social media. How much of that is people have finally realized that they're the targets?
That's true. And this rise in dissatisfaction for surveillance is a generational change. It's people who are younger than me who have a very innate understanding of technology who don't need to be explained to how this works. In a way, in 2001, under President Bush, we were talking to my parents who didn't have the slightest idea how surveillance technology worked, how the internet worked. You can't pull the wool over people's eyes now that they've had 20 years to familiarize themselves. And they've seen from their own data leaks the risk of having huge databases of information that people can hack or access, and suddenly your information is everywhere.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Max Burns, Democratic strategist, columnist over at the Daily Beast. He's got a new piece out, Forever Wars Won't End If the Surveillance State's Still Here. It's over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. But, I'm looking at this and I'm remembering back during Bush's push for immigration reform. And one of the things that they wanted to do was they wanted to chip every immigrant coming in. And that was all the rage for a bit. I don't know if you remember Tommy Thompson,
Yep.
who was the head of HHS, Health and Human Services at the time, saying that he was going to get chipped. Well, it was right around that time when my oldest daughter was born, and we had a guy come to the hospital and ask if we wanted to have the kid chipped. And I'm going, no. He's like, well, if she's ever abducted, you can find her. And I'm going, what if she doesn't want to be found? I mean, there were so many of these questions at the time that it was just incredulous to me that someone would offer that. And now you've got, again, it seems like it's everywhere.
It is. And I also remember in that time period, Michael Chertoff, who was heading counterterrorism for the Bush administration, describing chipping children and chipping migrants as one of the most humane things we can do to ensure their rights are protected. It was a completely backwards time. And there are people who were born after 9/11, who were born well into this war, who don't remember just how frantic that push was and how urgently we were sold this idea that if we were not immediately surveilled, if our data wasn't available for the government without court order immediately, there would be an imminent attack. And those attacks never came. And as our intelligence gathering has shown, even if they were coming, it's unlikely anything that was done would have predicted it anyway.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me is you'll have people say, but Max, we haven't had a terrorist attack. They're stopping things. I feel safe because nothing bad has happened yet. And there are going to be politicians who are going to go, no, we can't undo all this because it's keeping us safe. This illusion of safety and security, the Ben Franklin thing. This illusion is just that, an illusion in most cases.
It is. And we have certainly had terrorist attacks since. In fact, the Boston Marathon bomber posted his intent and a plan for bombing the marathon on Facebook. It was scooped up by the NSA's domestic terrorism data surveillance program. It wasn't acted on because they had scooped up so much data from Americans that they didn't have enough people to go through it all.
Yeah.
So what we've created essentially are now semi-permanent silos, just like we used to have farms in America. Now we have data farms, and that data lasts forever. And we still don't know the full extent of what's been collected. So that would be a critical first step for Congress, is getting some transparency in this process and stripping out those things like the remainder of the Patriot Act that have long since expired past their need.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, because I've often said, I don't really care if someone's, going through my emails. I hope somebody is, because I don't have time half the time. But if they're collecting all of this data, who is analyzing it? Who's looking at all of this stuff? Or is it just being stored somewhere to be reactionary? And that's not what it's supposed to be. We were told this was going to prevent things, not be this heap of information after the fact. So I find it, it's time we end this. So the question is there a push? And if there's not, how do we get a push to undo some of this stuff?
There is, and surprisingly, it's the progressive left and the libertarian conservatives who still sort of make up this small part of the Republican Party on the Hill, who have long been critics of the surveillance state. And now that these wars are over, And any argument that they serve a foreign intelligence purpose has been disproven. They're looking at using this for either take your pick for small government appeal, for civil liberties appeal. This is an issue that can unite left and right. And it's really these establishment defense industry Democrats and defense industry Republicans who are going to try and obstruct this at every turn.
Yeah, I mean, we look at China and the surveillance state that is, and how far how far down the road they are. And I've had people go, well, at least we're not doing that. And my answer was, well, yet, because eventually they will lull us into a position where all this stuff's happening because it's the latest, greatest new technology. Like every car in the country is going to have GPS under the guise of its vehicle avoidance software, so we know within inches of where your car is every second of the day.
Yeah, and China is a fantastic example. Their social credit system is an example of a country that has taken those silos and has actually put them to use. And it's actually so efficient. It controls so much of daily life that the Chinese government, by and large, has outsourced the oppression to friends and neighbors. Individuals now police themselves for fear of what a potential observed violation will mean for them. And that is a system that is not only possible in the United States, the only thing that prevents it is our political desire not to do it. And after what we saw on January 6th, I would not trust that desire to protect democracy goes too far.
No, you're right. And after what Texas just did on abortion, creating little bounty hunters who the websites are bogged down. There are people, I guess we're going to have, venture capitalists, tracking women's cycles so that they can check on them. Hell, Missouri did it. Why not some venture capitalist?
Yeah. And there are already individuals who have put forward things for automating the reporting process for individuals, making it easier for us to spy on and report each other to Greg Abbott in Texas. And if you think that companies in Silicon Valley that are working with police departments, that are working with the NSA, are not looking at how do we, within the realm of the law, quote unquote, monitor domestic protest groups, nonprofit organizations, you're crazy. They've already demoed that technology with multiple different organizations.
Yeah, it's already there. Something we got to fight back. That's why you got to read Max's most recent piece, Forever Wars Won't End If the Surveillance State's Still Here, written by Max Burns over at the Daily Beast. Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out. Max, as always, great talking with you. Excellent work. I can't wait to have you back again soon.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Our good friend Max Burns. Make sure you check out the piece. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Right back after this.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1916. That was the day that the Federal Employees Compensation Act was signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. The act was sponsored by Senator John Kern, a Democrat from Indiana, and Daniel McGillicuddy, a Democratic congressman from Maine. The act provided compensation for federal civil service employees that lost wages because they were hurt or killed on the job. There was great debate at the time over whether employees injured at work deserved to be compensated. Before the turn of the 20th century, those who sustained workplace injuries had little recourse. Employers blamed workers for accidents and typically refused compensation, leaving families destitute. Edward Gaynor, the president of the National Association of Letter Carriers, explained the debate around the 1916 proposal, saying, quote, "The only question, the fundamental question involved in this discussion is whether or not society should bear the burden of the injured worker in any industry." Increasingly, some lawmakers were beginning to make the case that society should indeed bear that burden. Workers and labor leaders organized around issues of workplace safety and demanded a compensation if they were injured on the job. The law providing such a safety net for federal employees was passed through the House of Representatives by an overwhelming margin of 288 to 6. Although the act only applied to federal employees, it was an important step forward in recognizing that all workers deserve to be compensated for workplace injuries. The Federal Office of Workers' Compensation Programs that operates today traces its history directly back to the 1916 Act. And because of this 1916 Act, 3 million federal employees and their families are covered under the Act's protections.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I said in the open, the reality is, struggled today to find an American-made vehicle that was, in a working class, kind of price range. And it goes back to, we need to rebuild our manufacturing capacity. I'm not complaining about the cars that they had. I'm complaining about the fact that we don't have enough being built here. And we've got to do something about it. And this Labor Day, as I was saying over the whole weekend, we need this massive investment by the administration to rebuild our manufacturing, but we also need to refocus on the American worker, not just from the worker standpoint, but the consumer side as well. Wages got to go up. Like I said at the beginning, that Model T was much more affordable back in 1917 than what we are seeing here today. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where we are, what we need to do, and where we need to go. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come back and share some thoughts. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is good to be with you, and I feel your pain. We gotta keep revitalizing Made in America.
No, absolutely. I have a Jeep Patriot. I love the Jeep Patriot. They discontinued it, brought on the Renegade, and moved that to Mexico. The step up from that to Compass, they moved that to Mexico. It's like, everything that I like, they seem to be. The Ford Bronco, I loved it. Made in Mexico. Can't go there.
Yeah. It's, at the same time, and then to their credit, Ford, GM, they're making some new investments in the United States, particularly with electric vehicles. Some of those won't be online for a couple of years. But your experience shows that they're still investing heavily in manufacturing in Mexico. And I think, I wanted to just dive into this for a second, because I think one of the frustrations I have is that when you go to a dealership, it's like, you have the whole song and dance or whatever, but the knowledge about what's made in America and what's not just isn't there necessarily. It's not top of mind for, unfortunately, the companies, and that it works its way down. And I'm very conscious of this. I have the UAW list. That's what I shop from, and I have cars that I'm super happy with. But it's not a big enough list, as you point out. And some of the really cool cars too, like the Bronco, the electric Mustang, and what have you. Those are not made in the United States. They should be.
Yeah, I looked at a couple of them. The EcoSport, that's made in Brazil. The Bronco's made in Mexico. The Escape is put together here with a lot of Chinese parts. So you're in this world where, and I understand, look, we're a global society. That's what we've been told. We've got a global supply chain. But I'm in this mindset right now that I think the pandemic has shown us maybe we need to rethink some of that. The fact that there is this massive chip shortage, maybe we should be investing in building some manufacturing capacity around that, so that we're not dependent on the rest of the world every time there's a global hiccup.
Completely agree. We ought to have more of the supply chain here. 100% correct about that. The other thing that needs to happen is that the NAFTA rules, became what's called the USMCA. That a Democratic Congress passed and Trump signed, but it has rules that should make it a little bit easier to make those vehicles in the United States once they're fully implemented. But unfortunately, there's a pretty long phase-in period, and already there are some car companies and others that are pushing back against these rules. saying that the domestic content requirements or the wage requirements that were put in, that's kind of the point.
Yeah, that is the point.
We don't want to make it easy to offshore this work to Mexico, where workers can be exploited, and we want to make sure that American consumers have access to more vehicles that are made in the United States by workers that are paid a decent wage.
But here's the thing that gets me, Scott, and this is where I've been talking about this for years, because back when you still were making the Chevy Suburban, I think it was, in Janesville, Wisconsin, they were splitting production between Mexico and Janesville. I don't know if you remember that back then.
Oh, yeah.
But it didn't matter. They were both sitting on the lot. They were the exact same price. And you go, I'm confused at how you've got so much cheaper labor costs in Mexico, and you're not passing that along to the consumer. Look, the Bronco was not cheap. And, it was like $35,000. It's not cheap, but it's the labor costs sure are.
Right. Yeah. It's like, what the difference with a lot of this is the margins that the companies get. And the problem, and we've seen this with just recent cases, that workers in Mexico still face difficult conditions and aren't necessarily even getting representation. There was the official union is basically a scheme with the government and the companies to keep wages down. And when workers try to organize an independent union, they face harassment, intimidation, all sorts of obstacles to do that. To the Biden administration's great and enduring credit, I think, they are aware of this. We have good friends in the International Labor Office of the Department of Labor, and they are bringing cases. And that change will unfortunately come slowly, but it will come. And so that does give me some hope that at least there's awareness that this is a challenge that we're going to have to face, that the Biden administration has to face. We have to be vigilant about the trade rules. And, Rick, as you point out, that we may need to make those investments in the critical components in our supply chain. You talked about semiconductors. We also need to make them in lithium-ion batteries, because we make a very few percentage of the world's lithium-ion batteries in the United States. China makes about 60 or 70% of them. And so when those batteries will probably be the highest value component of electric vehicles, the single most expensive part. And that means those jobs will have good wages. It's a very important production platform. And we have to make sure that those aren't made in the United States. That those aren't made in China for lots of different reasons. The environmental impacts, the labor exploitation, the fact that a lot of those companies are state-owned or heavily subsidized by the state. We need to make sure that through trade rules and through smart investments, that those batteries are made in the United States by American workers.
Well, I want them made in the U.S. by American workers because I'm tired of buying crap. I'm tired of buying stuff that it's junk out of the box. I mean, this is one of my problems. I mean, I have a friend who's a mechanic. Every time we talk, I bought this and it didn't work. I bought that and it didn't work. There was a day when you'd get, one of those parts, that Delphi made here in the U.S. that every time you put it in, worked.
Yeah, you're right. It reminds me, Rick, in a way, of this action that the Federal Trade Commission is taking to examine why all the ice cream machines in McDonald's don't work. Okay? Like none of the McFlurry machines ever work. You go in, you order something. Oh, no, sorry. You can't get an ice cream cone anywhere at any McDonald's. And so the FTC is looking at that. They need to do the same thing with like auto parts and what have you, because you're right. Those replacement parts I was going to use a bad word, but I won't. So they're substandard. And they are perpetually substandard. And why is that okay? That should not be okay. And one of the ways that we make sure that it's better is that we have higher quality parts made in the United States. But we do also need to clamp down
Yep.
on a lot of this as well, because consumers are getting ripped off. They think that they're buying something super cheap and that that's a good deal. They're going to end up paying more because they're going to be buying the same part multiple times instead of buying one good part. It might cost a little more.
I'm right there with you. And look, like I said, I'm not afraid to pay in a couple of bucks for a good quality product, but I want it made here. That doesn't seem that difficult to me. But the good thing is, August we saw a little boost in manufacturing jobs. I think that's a little good, especially since the job numbers weren't incredible. But a little boost, 37,000 new jobs in manufacturing, not bad.
Yeah. I mean that's a pretty good number. I mean, we'll still have a number of months. We'll still need a number of months of that to regain all the manufacturing jobs that we lost during the pandemic. Okay, and so we've got a ways to go. Rick, this is the singular challenge for Joe Biden on factory jobs and union factory jobs in particular. Every time we've had a recession since 1979, we have not recovered all the manufacturing jobs that were lost during those downturns.
Right.
And there's been no exception to that. I really do think that this post-pandemic recovery, that we can recover the manufacturing jobs that we lost during the pandemic and then create even more. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that's important. It's important to economic security. It's actually important to the goals of building more equity in our society, to making sure that, Rick, as you point out, that we're able to produce the things that we need in the United States, particularly at a time of great crisis. And it's going to take policy to get there. And so that's why we need the infrastructure bill and the other investments. We need to get those across the finish line. We need to keep the tariffs in place. Yes, that was a policy that originated during the last presidency. But we have right now probably not a better tool to counter all the unfair stuff that China and other countries throw at us. And so we need that combination as well. And we need to invest in workers. And if we're doing this, I believe that manufacturing can drive a big jobs recovery that's sustained, and that we can rebuild some of these communities. I'm just going to share a story with you that I heard on the Steelworkers Infrastructure Bus Tour, and this was in Northwest Indiana, where there's still a lot of steel production. And one of the people there said something that I think is totally true. He said, you can tell when the steel industry is doing well because the malls are busier, people are buying more things. And there's this virtuous cycle in the local economy that occurs that benefits everybody, absolutely everybody. And so that's what I think people need to understand. Even though manufacturing is not a large percentage of our economy anymore, it has outsized importance, because when the factory's working, there are more people buying other things in the community. And it makes a heap of difference.
Yeah, I remember a couple years ago I read a statistic from some economist who said for every manufacturing dollar that's out there, it reverberates through the local economy like 6 or 7 times. It has like a really massive impact on the local economy, much like prevailing wage. When you have a prevailing wage job in your community, that money reverberates through the economy multiple times and actually creates jobs as it continues to be respent, which is why we need this investment. I mean, this isn't very difficult stuff. And I'm looking at the president, today was, in New York going, hey, Ida came through, did some incredible damage. We got to rebuild. But here again, do we have the capacity to produce the things that we need to do the rebuilding?
Yeah. The short answer to your question is we do, but it will take that sustained market. It can't be start and stop, right? I mean, it has to be there, and we have to have the right rules. But you're also right that we are bare bones when it comes to some critical products. Rebuilding the electrical grid to make it more resilient takes something called grain-oriented electric steel, and there are only 1 or 2 facilities in the entire United States that make that. Right. I mean, most of it is imported. And so but it is a vitally important project to that kind of rebuilding. Just down the road from where I know your home base is, in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, they make armor plate and other sorts of plate that goes into bridges and aircraft carriers and things like that. And without those sustained contracts, those jobs dry up. And I remember visiting there just a couple years ago and going into a diner and talking to one of the waitresses, and she said, you can tell when things are going well because the guys are coming in, they're bringing their families, there's a buzz, the tips are better, and I'm able to spend that money elsewhere in the community. And again, that helps absolutely everybody. And so, making that investment and making sure that our cities are resilient is very important. Like, there was a levee rebuild in New Orleans after Katrina. It took way too long, obviously, but you know what worked in New Orleans this time? The levees did, because there was a massive investment in it. But for every example of where that investment has been made, there are dozens of examples of where we haven't gotten to it yet.
Right.
And it's going to take money, it's going to take policy to do that. And that's why the infrastructure bill is so important. And we've talked about this before. That's only a down payment. I mean, that's not the beginning and the end of all the needs that we have in the United States. That's a down payment, but we desperately need to get started on it.
No, we absolutely do, and that's why I'm hoping Nancy Pelosi came out and said we're moving forward. I'm thrilled to see that, and I hope we do. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, Major League Baseball's gear producer, the people who make the jerseys and stuff. I read a story that they're outsourcing production of the jerseys that they sell. How is it possible that even that we can't manufacture here?
I'm just shaking my head because it's just about greed, pure and simple. I mean, that's 100% of what it is. The contractors, the league, everybody else, they're like, you know what, we're making money off of this, and the players are happy too, the fans are happy, but we want to make more money. So, plenty is not enough for them. And so what happens is that workers in these communities are hurt. It's not like any fans or players are getting a better deal here. They're not. And the profits are going to these contractors, to the suppliers, and to the league. And it's just like, if you want a perfect example of what's wrong in our economy, that's it. That's it right there. They're made perfectly well, and everybody's able to make a buck off of it. But hey, we could be making a whole lot more money, but we're going to have to screw workers in the United States in the process to do it. Some people don't give that a second thought.
That's incredible. And maybe what's going to end up happening when they do go somewhere, we're going to end up, and I got to throw a shot at you, we're gonna end up with more Indiana football jerseys misspelled.
Oh yeah. Well, I am from Indiana, but this is my team right here. But yeah, that was so embarrassing. The Indiana or whatever it was. It's like, come on, you had one job. Let's do it.
There you go, Scott. I appreciate the time. As always, great talking with you.
All right, Rick. All the best to you.
You as well. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website, allianceforamericanmanufacturing.org, americanmanufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. The 32nd annual Emmy Awards show took place despite 51 of the 52 nominated performers boycotting the event. At issue was a strike by the members of the Screen Actors Guild. Powers Booth was the only nominated actor to attend. He won the Emmy that year for portraying the cult leader Jim Jones in a made-for-TV movie. In his acceptance speech, he acknowledged his lonely presence at the Emmys. He said, "This is either the most courageous moment of my career or the stupidest." SAG members, along with the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists and the American Federation of Musicians, all went on strike that summer. Members of the Screen Actors Guild were displeased with their salaries. They wanted a 32% increase. They were also concerned about changes in the industry. They did not feel they were being compensated for the revenue they helped generate through paid cable and video cassettes. The Screen Actors Guild had its origins in the Maskers Club. Actors formed that club because they were upset with the grueling hours expected of them by Hollywood studios. Eventually, in 1933, the Screen Actors Guild was started. After initial hesitation by some big-name actors to join the union, SAG membership grew from 80 to more than 4,000 members. Many famous actors supported the union, including Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney. In the late 1940s, future President Ronald Reagan was elected president and served as president of SAG for 7 terms. The 1980 strike was one of the longer strikes in the union's history, lasting 94 days and settling at the end of October.
Hooray for Hollywood, that phony super coney Hollywood.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So interestingly enough, Mexico, their Supreme Court evidently voted unanimously to decriminalize abortion, while our state of Texas has figured out a way to not only almost ban it completely, but to turn its citizens into little bounty hunters, going to go chasing after each other and reporting on each other, snitching on each other. We're going to turn into a snitch society. Now, people were upset that they didn't make any exemptions for rape or incest. And thank goodness for Governor Greg Abbott, because he has figured out how to make sure that no one ever gets pregnant through rape. This is fantastic. He's going to make it illegal. Yeah, that's it. He's going to make rape illegal. It's going to be done. No exceptions. It's kind of crazy. Here to share some thoughts on this great thought on how we're going to make rape illegal. I've asked Chris Hahn to come talk with us. He's a syndicated radio host and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. You can check out his stuff over at ChristopherHahn.com. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm good. So the governor of Georgia, or Texas, might as well be Georgia. The governor of Texas is now, he's figured it out. He's going to end rape.
Yeah, Minority Report was trending on Twitter all day today, and I was like wondering why. I love that movie. I happen to think Tom Cruise is one of the best movie stars, frankly. But it was trending because obviously Greg Abbott has found those special kids. I can't remember what they were called, who would tell you when a crime was going to be committed. Horrible.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy, but he's going to eliminate all rapists. And look, Texas is a kill 'em state. So is this, we're just going to go kill the rapists? Is this what he's talking about? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know what this guy's been talking about ever, frankly. He's so afraid of Dan Patrick primarying him and losing, the governorship. And I don't know, maybe he has his eye on some sort of national office, but whether it be president or something else, that he is just really just going to bizarre lengths to be the most conservative guy in America, whether it comes to abortion, voting, COVID. He just wants to do whatever he can to appear to be as far to the right as possible.
Yeah, it's crazy. But here's the thing. There's part of me, and I'm hoping I'm right here. And obviously you've been doing this a very long time. You're as a Democratic strategist, you know the game. I think this is a massive overreach. I have seen women who have never been political finally coming awake to the reality that the Republican Party, not their friends.
Oh, it's a gift. I don't think we're talking about Afghanistan anymore, are we, Rick? And I thought we might be talking about it the rest of the year. The 2022 election will be about Roe v. Wade. It'll be about choice, period. That is the election. And there's virtually nothing they can do between now and then to change that, unless the Republicans in the Senate decide to codify Roe v. Wade into law, so that so that it's not an issue in 2022. And I don't see them doing that.
Yeah, but
so I fully expect choice to be the issue, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and they have scorned half the population of this country. So good luck.
no, and this is one of those moments where I'm going, because I've known people who've said, no, they're never going to be able to get away with this. The Supreme Court will never allow it to happen. I'm going, they just did.
Yeah, they just did. And frankly, there are all sorts of precedents that they just blew by here. Forget about Roe v. Wade. I mean, that's a major precedent, but other precedents about government delegating police powers and governmental powers to an individual who can arbitrarily enforce them. You can't do that in America. There are dozens of precedent in law with that the Supreme Court had to ignore not to grant injunctive relief, which says to me that we've got a bunch of zealots on the Supreme Court that are just going to do whatever it takes to get rid of Roe. And whether it's, if this case gets back to the Supreme Court, I believe it will probably very soon, they may overturn the Texas law, but I don't see them overturning the Missouri law, which will in and of itself get rid of Roe.
Or the Mississippi one. Isn't there a Mississippi law as well?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the Mississippi law, but I know that the Missouri law is on the docket for the spring session of the Supreme Court. So yeah, hand down the decision getting rid of Roe at the beginning of the summer next year. Fantastic. Good.
Just so you can get out of Dodge in
Good
time.
planning. Good planning. I know that this has been 35 years of planning by the Federalist Society and right-wing nuts in the conservative movement in the Republican Party. But the timing couldn't be worse for them. Look, I think gerrymandering probably gets them the House no matter what happens, probably. And I say probably because I do think this is a really bad thing for them to be doing right now. But this saved the Senate for the Democrats. The Democrats are going to pick up seats in the Senate.
No, this is
huge.
huge.
By the way, and I said on my radio show 2 weeks ago, I quite frankly believe that you have an opportunity here to maybe pick off a senator right now. Lisa Murkowski, why are you still a Republican? You're pro-choice. They're not going to nominate you in Alaska. Time to come over. Just come over. It's fine. You could be like Angus King. You could be an independent, whatever. Caucus with us. Get rid of the filibuster and let us pass a few things like voting reform.
No, we absolutely need it. And this is one of those moments where I was going to bring that up. At some point, do we not have to start talking about passing some legislation and the filibuster standing in the way of getting anything done?
Yeah, we got to do it, right? I mean, look, everybody's gnashing their teeth over Joe Manchin. First of all, there are 50 Republicans who are worse than Joe Manchin, all 50 of them. Yep. Any one of them on any day is worse than Joe Manchin. I'll take Joe Manchin over anyone. Second, I don't think Joe Manchin wants his legacy to be the guy who stood in the way of voting reform that would ensure people had the right to vote in this country. I don't think that's who he is. So let him say what he's got to say right now. I know he's, giving us agita over Biden's Build Back Better plan, over the infrastructure package. I know he's giving us all sorts of grief. Just relax. He voted to move it forward. He's going to vote to pass it. It's going to get tweaked. It might not be 3.5 trillion. It might be 3.4 trillion. We'll be fine. It'll be fine. And by the way, it's a 10-year spending plan. So it's not like it's real money anyway. So just everybody relax.
Yeah, but it is over the long haul something we desperately need. And it has to get done. And if it doesn't get done, what do you think the chances are, since you brought this up, what do you think the chances are of us not getting the $1.2 trillion hard infrastructure plan? Because the progressives are going to go, well, if we're not getting this, screw you, we're not going the other way.
We're getting both of them. We're getting both of them, and we're getting them this year.
Okay, that's what I want to hear.
Let me explain something. I don't know if Josh Gottheimer is listening to your program. I know he might listen to my radio show and my podcast. But Josh, you won't get reelected if this stuff doesn't pass. Sorry. Doesn't mean you're going to lose a primary. You're not going to win. No Democrat is safe if we fail to pass this. We remember what happened to the Democrats when Clinton failed to pass his big budget plan, when Obama had issues passing his big plans. Now, you've got to do the work, okay? We're tired of letting the right wing in this country define where the center is.
Yep.
Okay. I appreciate what Bernie Sanders and AOC and others have done to move the debate back to the center by taking positions on the left. Yeah, I think this will get tweaked. It should get tweaked. That's what legislation is. But it's going to pass. And it's going to pass this year. Nancy Pelosi will get it done, and my former boss, Chuck Schumer, will get it done in the Senate.
Yeah, that's what we need. Basically, go big or get sent home. That's been my mindset on this from the very beginning.
But by the way, Rick, nobody's talking about it other than a few people, like a few pundits in Washington. Chuck Todd says stupid stuff about it every couple of days. Joe Manchin will write an op-ed, but nobody. I don't know. You walk around town. You and I are both political. We're known to people as political types. Nobody comes up to me and says, they better stop that spending plan. Not one person.
People want it.
I've done 2,500 national television appearances. I was at a wedding this week, and a lot of people wanted to talk politics to me. Not one person said, how are they going to stop the spending plan? Nobody.
Because people want it. Once you find out what's in it, it's going to benefit people. I think it's what we need. It's the kind of reset we've needed for a while. You brought up Chuck Todd there for a second, who took kind of a public spanking by Claire McCaskill, which I think you needed in this moment over this Texas abortion nonsense that's going on. And she said, look, there's no both sides in this, so don't even start with that nonsense.
I can't watch him anymore. Meet the Press used to be a part of my weekend. I used to enjoy it. And frankly, I remember when Chuck Todd, when I first started working in the Senate, Chuck Todd ran it was like a newsletter that was read by everybody in Washington. It was fantastic. It was the Daily Wire. It was kind of gossipy. I don't know what happened to him. I guess he's still kind of gossipy. He's unwatchable to me. And you guys know where my agent is, NBC. Give him a call. I'm available on Sunday mornings. I got nothing else to do but walk the puppy.
And there you go. And I'll put in a good word for you as well. I think you're a good guy. I hope people check out your website, ChristopherHahn.com, where you can pick up the Aggressive Progressive podcast there, right?
That's right. The Aggressive Progressive is available on any podcast platform. You got some weird, iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Pandora. But if you got some weird, quirky podcast system you're using, it's there too for some reason. I don't know how it gets there. It just gets there.
It's everywhere. We got smart people putting stuff out, and that's a good thing. I did want to ask you about what's going on in Portland, because the city of Portland, evidently they've got this emergency resolution banning trade with Texas. So I wanted to get your thoughts over, is this a viable solution, or is this just headline grabbing stuff?
I mean, it's headline grabbing. We have a constitution that says you can't do anything to stop interstate commerce. Everybody just stop. The Texas law is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court, and I'm not, forget about the abortion part of it. You'd have to overturn Roe v. Wade to have the 6-week ban. But having people, with vigilante justice enforcing it violates so many laws in the United States, so many provisions of our Constitution that have been thoroughly vetted by the Supreme Court over the last 200 years, right? But Portland is doing the same thing. You can't infringe upon interstate commerce. Now, if the mayor of Portland decides that he's not going to buy something from Texas, then he doesn't have to buy things from Texas. But you can't outright ban it. That's an infringement on interstate commerce.
Yeah, I just thought I saw that. I'm like, boy, if that isn't stupid. But hey, you got to make your protests where you can, and
yeah,
I'm kind of okay with that. That's the way we go. But you brought up the court, and look, a lot of people now are finally realizing just how bad this court is. I've been saying for years the Supreme Court is horribly anti-worker, horribly anti-working class. All of the things that I've been fuming over all these years, the attacks on labor rights, all of the corporate decisions, because while some may believe that this court was compiled to take Roe away, I don't believe that at all. I believe this court was compiled to take us back to the days of Lochner, take us back to the days where if you were desperate enough and hungry enough to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages, that was your choice, buddy. The abortion part of it was the sweetener on top to get the lunatic fringe to vote for them. So for me, there's a moment here where working class people and women, because abortion is a working class issue, maybe we finally realize to just how horrible this court is.
Well, you bring up Lochner, and most people don't even know what that is, right? But everybody knows what Roe is, and you're right. You're absolutely right. this court has been making small decisions that go unnoticed by most Americans that hurt working men and women every single session. And it's only going to get worse. The fact that they are taking a shot at a well-known decision that everybody is aware of will bring the attention that is finally needed for Americans, particularly Democrats and liberals who tend to doze off in the off years. Get them awake and come out and vote. You know, and I know that Republicans around the country are making it harder to vote, but you know, I feel a wave coming. I do. I feel that the Republicans have revealed themselves for who they are to too many Americans now, and there is no turning back. This big lie nonsense, you know, having a guy like Larry Elder be your leader in California, you know, it's people know, people see what's going on here, and I get it. There's a lot of misinformation. It's going to steer people in a variety of different directions, but when the rubber meets the road, the real messaging here is that the Republicans are taking away rights of Americans every single day, and they're touching them through the courts and through their policies. And you better get with it. You better start electing Democrats at every level of office. And we'll see. We'll see what happens to this California recall next week.
So just so I get this straight, I got to get this straight, Chris, because if I'm getting you right, you're saying this is the moment we finally wake up, because we have these conversations every time the court does something horrible. I had this back in 2018 when they rammed through Janus. I had it back when they did the Knox case. I had it back Epic Systems, Johnson Control. All of these things go, this is the moment. This is now. We're finally going to wake up. Is this that moment we finally wake up?
It's the moment. You know why? Because it's undeniable. People know this decision. They know what's going on here.
I wanted to get that. So is this now the moment where Joe Biden does something like, oh, we're going to pack the courts, or is this is a voting moment?
It's a voting moment. I think he should pack the courts because, frankly, Mitch McConnell stole at least one Senate seat, and frankly, you know, there are 5 people that are put on that court by presidents who were elected with a minority of the vote in this country. So yeah, I would pack the court. I don't think he's gonna. But I think that we need some significant court reform in this country. And I don't think that the Democrats will have the votes to do that right now. But I do think, like I said, I don't think Joe Manchin's going to allow his legacy to be the guy who stood in the way of election reform and allowed this democracy to crumble. And if he wants that to be his legacy, well, then that's not the guy I know. So I think he's going to change his. I think, you know, I get it. Let him do his thing. Let him play his, you know, his cards the way he needs to play them for his own electability in West Virginia. But at the end of the day, I think Joe Manchin's going to be there when we need him.
Yeah. So last question I've got for you, because, you know, I'm looking at the Supreme Court, and I remember I watched intently all of the justices, confirmation hearings, and I remember John Roberts very clearly. Mr. Balls and Strikes, going to call balls and strikes. He believed in stare decisis. He decided law, wasn't into rewriting things out of whole cloth. The legacy of the Roberts Court is going to be just that, overturning longstanding precedent, destroying all of that stuff. That's the precedent of.
Well, in his defense, Rick, he did vote with the liberals to hear this case that on the Texas law. He voted with the liberals. So I mean,
that's the funny part of this. There was a moment where we thought he was the Antichrist and he was bad. Now he doesn't look that bad.
We take him over Justice Alito or Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett. You know, I still think that Gorsuch, just reading his opinions over the years, I still think that he's a guy, if you can make a black letter law case to, I mean, that doesn't help you in a thing like Roe. But if you can make a black letter law case to Gorsuch is going to come down on the side of black letter law. Gorsuch will, in my opinion, vote to overturn this Texas law because of the, literally over 150 years of precedent of not allowing vigilante justice, not allowing the state to delegate powers to an unaccountable civilian. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
You could delegate it to a specific group who you're paying to do that, and there's some sort of contractual relationship. You just can't blanketly say to anyone, go ahead and enforce this law. That's not the way it works in the United States of America.
Yeah, but my problem with Gorsuch, and I hope you're right. I want to believe. But my problem with Gorsuch is this was a guy who was willing to let somebody die on the side of the road because his brakes froze up, and gave him the choice of get fired from your job or die. And there was no middle ground. So I got a problem with that. But I hope you're right. I hope he does come around. I hope this does.
He's a weird guy. Like I said, I don't think that I don't think he's pro-choice. Don't get me wrong. And I do think that if he's given the opportunity, he will get rid of Roe, because that was what they raised these people to do, right?
Correct.
Federalist Society, they've all raised these people to kill Roe, which ultimately is, it's a murder-suicide plot, because when you kill Roe, you kill the conservative movement in America.
Yeah, this is where I don't go as far with you on this. Yes, Roe was a big part of it. I'm still, their number one goal is to side with corporate America at every turn.
You're right. But like I said, you could do that because people don't even notice it. It's like the frog boiling in the pot of water here.
Yeah.
It's a slow kill. Roe is a shot to the head, and you see the blood all over the place. And now everybody's mad at you for it. And you better run.
Yeah, let's hope they stay mad. Yep, I'm right there. Let's hope that they stay mad, and when they get mad, they go to the voting booth and they vote. Chris, I appreciate the time. Always good talking to you, man. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Great to be here, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Good stuff. Chris Hahn, syndicated radio host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Find that over at ChristopherHahn.com. We'll get links out on how you can find that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Here's a hot topic for Labor Day: heat. It's been a hell of a hot summer, exploding the top off thermometers with triple-digit readings across the country. As we're learning, week after week of this debilitating heat intensifies wildfires, causes electric grids to fail, kills millions of wild animals, including fish, burns up crops, and concentrates toxic air. But there's another impact that draws little notice. Heat kills workers. Indeed, searing days of 95, 100, 110 degrees are killing and injuring more U.S. workers each year than all the floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes combined. Those toiling outdoors, including farm workers, roofers and carpenters, airport ground crews, landscapers, road and street repairers, letter carriers, and trash collectors, are in the direct line of fire for this invisible, insidious killer. But working indoors is no better if there's no AC, for metal and stone warehouses and manufacturing plants become ovens. Then, welcome to climate change. 20 of the last 21 years gave us the hottest temperatures on record. Unsurprisingly, the yearly number of worker heat deaths in that period doubled. Also, researchers have determined that extreme workplace heat is causing about 170,000 people a year to suffer injuries on the job. The impact of heat is poorly understood, even by workers. A sudden heat stroke is not the only worry, for rising body temperatures can quickly fuzz the mind, weaken muscles, numb concentration. So workers fall, their hands get caught in machinery, they touch the wrong wire, etc. This is Jim Hightower saying America's power elites literally don't feel the intensity of this heat. So the richest country in the history of the world continues to subject millions of its people to senseless suffering and death, not even talking about this embarrassment, much less stopping it. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Vietnam, evidently they jailed a guy for 5 years for having the audacity to break the COVID restrictions. Evidently, he broke quarantine rules and spread the virus to other people, according to state media. He got 5 years in jail. 5 years. We got nitwits running around trying to deliberately spread it. I'm at the supermarket today. There's a woman basically breathing on my neck. Yeah, I turn around, I'm going, dude, what? You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic kind of thing. You know, have you heard of it? Probably not, because you weren't wearing a mask at the supermarket. Literally, I could feel her breath on my neck. That's how close she was. Can we put her in jail for 5 years? And this is one of those things where you just go, what is wrong with people? What is wrong with us that we can't do the right thing? You know, I had a doctor appointment today, and I saw the doctor, and you know, we started talking about this, and she's like, "Oh, hey, thanks for not being an idiot." And I don't know why she would have thought that I would have been, you know, one of those mask holes. But you know, I said no. I go, look, you know, I explained the story. I'm going, this is the crazy stuff that goes on, and she's like, you know, I don't get it. I don't get why people are this dumb. How did we get dumb people like this? I go, you know, I don't know, but when people are taking, you know, drinking Clorox and shoving lights up their behinds, I don't know, you know, maybe the leadership, something along that lines. And we started talking about the drugs, and she's going, you know, the drugs that they're taking are really harsh. You know, you go, look, you may not, you not necessarily like getting the vaccine, but it's the safest, most effective thing possible because we've tested it. And look, there are lots of people who've had it. Billions. We're now seeing more people going to the doctor because of this horse dewormer. Now, is it to the extent that they made it out to be the stories last week where they're turning away gunshot victims? No, and I didn't think that was the case anyway. But you do have the places filling up. In fact, Idaho. You go, how'd the virus even find Idaho? Evidently, hospitals in Idaho are beginning to ration health care. This is according to the AP. Didn't make this up. Not some hippie liberal site. This is the Associated Press saying that public health officials there in Idaho have activated what they're calling crisis standards for care. That's allowing the healthcare institutions to ration at the northern hospitals because, they got more patients than they've got beds. So you got to decide, you know, who do you take? And, you know, the doctor that I was seeing said, you know, she's got a friend in Florida, of course, who evidently they just intubated her mother. And she's really sick. And she had another friend who got it too, but showed no symptoms. And she said they pounded her with everything. Did the Joe Rogan. Threw the kitchen sink at it. Instead of just going, why the hell didn't you just get the vaccine? I mean, that's the thing that stuck between my ears with the Joe Rogan thing. Look, you know, I know Joe Rogan had a doctor administer him the proper dose of the horse dewormer, and it wasn't a horse dewormer. It was an actual FDA-approved drug. I know he had all of the best care you could get. You know, he's not lug nut running down to the Tractor Supply and grabbing a whole handful with the energy drink. That's my concern. We've got people who are going, well, if it's a little good, the whole bottle will be better. That's a problem. It's a big problem. And one that there's part of me that goes, maybe we need to start rationing, Karen. And my argument back to her was, because I said, you know, I brought this up, and she goes, no, that's not who we are. We're better than that. And we are. And I want to be. I do. I want to help the dim. I do, really. I don't like being the guy who goes, you know, it's your choice. You did this. You own it. She said, no, we don't do that. We don't do it. And I'm like, you know, at some point, do we not do something? And this is where I went back to her. I said, look, eventually capitalism will step in. If the government is ineffective, if they can't do something to get this under control, if they can't move us in the right direction, capitalism will. Because insurance companies, they don't want to keep paying, you know, $100,000 every time someone gets sick and has to go on a ventilator and is in the hospital for weeks. They don't want to pay those huge bills. That's a shot to their bottom line. They can't buy the new $70,000 vehicle whenever they want. They got to pay it out in claims. They don't want that. When employers, can't get people to come to work because one guy didn't get vaccinated and now, thanks to him, everybody else has got it. Capitalism is going to have to fix it. And this is where the fun part is. The fun part is watching the folks who keep telling us that we need to rely on the free market. It's going to be fun to watch conservatives turn on the free market. You're already seeing it. You're already seeing it. Corporations can't tell me what to do. Well, wait a second. You just said corporations can say they don't have to make cakes for the gay people. So wait a second. You can't have corporations can do whatever they want until it affects me. Oh, no, that's not how it works. Some people think that. The reality is corporations are going to figure this out. They don't want to be liable for it. They don't want to pay for it. And eventually, like I said, if government can't or won't, corporate America will. And maybe it's in the form of, and we've already seen airlines that have done this, charging higher premiums for your health insurance, higher co-pays and deductibles, co-insurance, which I love that one. Wait a second, I've got insurance. Why do I need co-insurance? Corporate America will figure it out. And like on election night 2016, when my conservative friend said it's going to be interesting watching liberals turn into states' rights people, this is going to make it interesting for me to watch cons turn on corporate America. Because like I said, they're going to protect themselves. Because they're in the business of not being sued. They're in the business of making as much money as they can for themselves and not sharing for the rest of us. So I think it's going to be interesting. I'm actually kind of looking forward to that on a certain level. When the lawsuits start hitting, because there are a bunch of moneyed groups out there who want to sue companies into you've got to allow them to come in unvaccinated. Going to be interesting to see where the courts go, because understand our Supreme Court, back to what I was talking about before, very much in the pocket of corporate America. In fact, almost 3/4 of the cases that come before the court where the Chamber of Commerce has thrown in a brief have gone their way. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people from the top.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day hundreds of ILWU strikers blocked railroad tracks near Longview, Washington. They hoped to stop grain shipments from moving in and out of the EGT grain terminal. Longshoremen had been sitting down on the tracks throughout the summer, resulting in over 100 arrests. No trains had moved in or out of the terminal since July. But then a federal judge issued an injunction against ILWU pickets. The BNSF Railroad tried to move grain once again. ILWU picketers in Vancouver were able to hold off the train until police forcibly dispersed the crowd. Then, hundreds gathered at Longview to block the train from coming in. That's when police went on the offensive. They used clubs and pepper spray against the longshoremen, arresting 19. They threw ILWU President Bob McElrath to the ground. Rumors spread that police had broken his arm. Hundreds of regional longshoremen rushed to Longview. The Seattle and Tacoma ports shut down in protest. The next morning, 10,000 tons of grain were opened onto the railroad tracks. The grain export terminal was the first to be built in the Pacific Northwest in almost 30 years. EGT hoped to undercut the powerful ILWU, who controlled operations at the port since its founding in the 1930s. The union refused to agree to work 12-hour shifts at straight time. The EGT hoped to break the hiring halt by refusing to recognize maintenance and inside workers at the terminal. They then attempted to fill jobs with workers from the operating engineers, but the ILWU persevered. By the end of January, EGT had backed off many of its demands, negotiations resumed, and days later, the contract was signed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So President Biden is going to give an address on Thursday night on the pandemic. And look, you know, the reality is we need to do a lot of stuff and quickly, as this is still ramping up. He's going to have a 6-pronged strategy. And I don't know which one of those prongs is going to go get the nitwits who refuse to get vaccinated. I don't know how you get there. I don't know how you get, is there a prong on there to have some nitwit woman not breathe on my neck without a mask? Is there a prong for that? I sure hope so. I sure hope there's a way to get stupid to stop doing dumb things. I just kind of throwing that out there. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney, to come with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, a 6-pronged strategy. I mean, there's a new is this a new strategy?
Well, I think some things are going to be new in it. You know, and he's going to, obviously the president's going to reinforce, you know, exactly what you were talking about, to, you know, get inoculated, get the vaccine, wear a mask, you know, different, especially states where this has really, you know, become a problem. Kentucky, for example, is in a, you know, very bad situation, as is, you know, Florida and Arkansas and, you know, the states. That doesn't mean the other states are immune from, you know, from doing something, but, you know, be interesting to see, you know, some new ideas they might have. He'll reiterate some of the old ones too.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you know, do the right thing. You know, I mean, do we need to bring Skip Lee back or Spike Lee back and get him to go, hey, just do the right thing?
Right. I mean, the numbers are going up with the amount of people vaccinated. Just needs to go up, obviously, faster, and should have went up a long while back faster, obviously.
Yeah.
You know, that would have helped. One thing, too, the information they need to get out there, I'm hesitant to, you know, even bring this up, but my father, he's 98, and I went to the pharmacy 3 days ago, and I asked about getting the booster, you know, the third shot. He had Moderna.
Right.
They said, oh, yes, bring him in. But then today's story said that it's not going to be, the booster is not approved till September the 20th for Moderna. So I'm thinking, okay, so does it need to be officially approved? So some of the press stories, I think, are not helping.
Yeah, no, I've heard that, you know, if you're in the, in like your father clearly would be in the risk category, that you can get access to it. Like I can't get it. You need a doctor to say that you have a condition that they want to make sure you're at the front of the line, and I get that.
Also, when they say approved for September 20th, that means for the general population.
That's kind of my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, some of the media reports, when you read them, I'm like, okay, could they please rewrite them?
Yeah, well,
the national media.
It's about getting stuff out.
Purposes.
Yeah, it's about getting stuff out. We got to churn, man. Got to get stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I look at this story out of Idaho. Did you see this? Where the health officials there are saying, you know, the northern part of the state, if you need to ration care, start rationing because we're full.
Right. Well, that's Kentucky. Kentucky's hitting the same thing, full with the hospital beds, just as they said in the northern part of Idaho.
Now, the thing that's interesting to me at this moment, you look at a lot of these rural communities that desperately need investment in healthcare. They desperately need investment in infrastructure for healthcare, and this is, you know, one of those things that, you know, kind of pops up. I mean, we've got counties in this state that don't actually have a hospital in them. They might have a clinic, but if you need to go to an actual hospital, you're trucking it somewhere else. And this is one of those moments where you go, you know, we should be investing heavily in making sure that, oh, I don't know, we've got enough beds for people, especially as the country gets older. Which is why I think, an investment bill, much like they're trying to push here, is not a bad idea. But it looks like Joe Manchin's kind of staying the stick in the mud.
Well, I think, with Senator Joe Manchin, it's now boiled down to some numbers that he's thrown out there. He'll support, according to the article, which is not Fox News, it was Politico, and according to it, he said he'll support as little as $1 trillion of the $3.5 trillion. Other sources say that the most he'll support, it goes up a little bit, $1.5 trillion. So at this point in time, because the Senate is 50-50 and because they don't have and won't have one single Republican vote, and it starts to get a little shaky in the House, too, because the Speaker has a three-person majority, with votes, then I think that they're going to, obviously, they've got to take this off the front pages. I mean, I'm all for transparency, but somebody's got to sit down. You can't do it at a press conference with, Senator Schumer and Manchin, et cetera. This is going to have to be, breakfast with somebody, and they've got to decide where they want to be. And then at that point in time, too, I think it's going to be important of the verbiage and how the Democratic leadership side handles it. With this weird situation of 50-50, people have to face a fact. It is 50-50, and he's not going to go with $3.5 trillion. And that's the way the cards are falling now. So I think they've got to get a strategy and, find out where he wants to be. By the way, have you seen some of the statistics? He's not in West Virginia, not necessarily really grabbing the polling numbers as a result even of all of this.
No, because I think that, the people that I know in West Virginia, they want this investment. They need this investment. What he should be doing, and I've said this from the beginning, and I'm not saying he's not doing it now. He should be, he's got all this power. He should be leveraging a huge chunk of this to come to his state.
Right, exactly.
I mean, isn't that what you would do? I mean, you spent years in Congress. Wasn't bringing home the bacon part of it?
Yes, I was called one time the Prince of Pork because of things I put in the Ohio budget at the time, and I said I resent that. I want to be called king, not Prince. I brought back
That's your job, man.
I brought back a lot of my taxpayers sent that money to Columbus, Ohio at the time I was in the legislature. I thought, well, we need to take it back home, for the jobs and the resources. And you're right about West Virginia. That's why his numbers are not, way up over the top. He's below Senator Shelley Moore Capito. She's a Republican. But the bottom line is, Sanders wants $3.5 trillion. He's been the lead on this, and Manchin is probably at $1.5 trillion. So somebody's got to sit down and decide the numbers first. You can't plug language into numbers and then change the numbers, because that's what this does. By September 15th, there's a draft.
Yeah.
And they're plugging thoughts and numbers and child tax credits and schools and everything into $3.5 trillion. Now, if it's not going to be $3.5 trillion, they have to know that so they can plug the goals and ideas into whatever, 1.5 trillion, 1.8 trillion, I don't know, whatever it would finally be. Yeah. But they're going to have to decide that. Then they can move on and claim a victory.
Yeah,
they're still going to have the language. They'll have a little bit less money.
Yeah, but here's my problem with all of this. This still keeps biting at them. It's still in the news. It's still a headline, especially in a moment where right now, the Republicans have given the Democrats a great gift with what they're doing in Texas. That should be left as the headline every day. Don't let them chime in. Oh, hey, by the way, Joe Manchin doesn't want to invest in the country. Or am I missing something here?
No, I think that, again, I was saying earlier, the verbiage that's used, if they don't have the votes, they have to deal with Manchin. And, of course, let's face it, there's a couple more. But, Manchin's the lead on it. And they've got to come to terms and put the best, face forward on it of beginning the process to change, which direction they want the country to go in and how they want to do it. So, cutting to the chase here, let's say that they're going to become innovative and really, help people more with child tax credits, right? Or they're going to help with, after-school programs or whatever they're going to do to help people with kids. All right. Well, they're still going to help people with kids. They're just not going to have as much money, but they're going to start some, new programs and ideas. So I think they've got to plug that number in, go with what they were going to go with, and, then they will aim at some point in time to get an additional bill somewhere along the line that will plug into the ideas that they pass, because they've got to pass them in the House too.
Yeah, this is where I keep going back to
It's a big moment.
I keep going back to my original mindset on all this. Is that I fear at the end of the day we end up with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've got friends who are very confident both bills are going to pass. And don't worry, Rick. No. But have we not seen movies like this before?
No, I don't think there's I don't have a confidence level. I'm going to put the infrastructure, transportation, roads and bridges bill, I'm going to put that at 75%. I'm going to put the $3.5 trillion as it sits, $3.5 trillion at 30%. That's where I would, throw the odds. You notice I didn't say, 100% on the infrastructure. It could slip and fall, and one of the reasons there could become infighting. There could be lack of votes because if they're just going to dismiss the 3.5 trillion, there are some people that won't support the infrastructure, roads and bridges. So I'm with you. This is a very dangerous process right now. It's a tough process. They're running out of time. But the one thing's for sure, they can't accept nothing. If they accept nothing, they're going to have a problem.
Yep. No, you're right. And look, as I said,
they're not going to get a break for, quote, not passing the, quote, liberal bill.
Right.
They're not going to get a break for that. They're going to be deemed the do-nothing, group.
Absolutely. They've got to get something out of this so that next year's election is all about abortion. And it's not an issue that I'm overly, on top of. It's not my issue. I hope I'm on the right side of it. But the Republicans, I think, gave them a gift. Because every woman I know, and I don't know about you, but everyone I know, they are fired up about what's going on in Texas.
Well, they are, and again, if this keeps up with the headlines on the infrastructure and the human infrastructure and the losses, etc., the base then, yes, it will be excited about what the Supreme Court's done. I agree, but the base also will become disillusioned. And I said this the other day. You can't go home to the state and say, well, we're 50-50. Now, if you're a Democrat senator, we're 50-50. You need to give us more people. Now, this is true. They do, but you need to give us more people. We don't have enough. People's mindsets, I've seen this on the Republican side. Their mindset is you run the Senate, and you have the vice president, you have the vote. That will be a lot of people's mindset.
Yep.
You can't explain your way out of 50-50, so they have to make something work.
It's got to work. Got to go. And the Republicans understand. I think they know they're in a little bit of trouble, and they're shuffling around their fundraising scheme, moving out of New York, leaving Wall Street and heading down to Tampa. It's right in November, which should be a peak time for COVID in sunny Florida. But bringing the Donald back as the front and center guy.
Guess who lives in Florida? And they're saying New York because the circumstances are beyond their control. They normally have a big December retreat, but again, they are moving it to Tampa, and they're bringing Trump out. Now, this will be the GOP House campaign arm, the House Campaign Committee for the Republicans, and of course, they want to start this out with Trump to load up the coffers on it. And yes, they're moving it to Florida.
Well, I guess that's you got to do what you got to do in Florida. I guess is as good a place as any. Take a bunch of old white people.
I think with the Republicans deep down, Rick, if they would be honest about it publicly, they'll take Trump for the raising of the money that they would really, really prefer he not run. The powers to be I'm talking about in Congress.
Oh, no, I've heard that numerous times. But the thing is he gets the base all tingly in the panties, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a money raiser.
And finally, why is Joe Biden's staff worried?
This is one where I'm going to say the chief of staff needs to have come to the chief of staff meeting, and they need to calm down. Okay, they're worried about President Biden. This is the staff, and it's leaking out of the White House. I mean, it's not one of those horrible, horrible leaks, but it's one of those, we're wringing our hands, and we want everybody to know it. And they're worried about the staffers, about, the president taking questions. One time he turned around when somebody asked him a question. They don't want that to happen. They don't want him to veer off his orchestrated messaging. They don't want that to happen. The staff wants it to stop, on and on. And the only thing I've got to say about this is that as far as gaffes, people make gaffes. The president's pretty candid. When you're candid, you will tend to then, make some gaffes the media will like to pick up on.
Yep.
But let's go back to the history of 4 years of the gaffe master, all right, of the constant hourly gaffes by Twitter or whatever of President Trump. If the staff's all worried, he almost could have won, okay, the election. So I think they need to calm down. Let Biden be Biden.
Yep.
And you can't, if you orchestrate him and he won't answer questions and you try to do that with him, they just need to calm down. Biden has survived 30 years in public office, the VP, he won the presidency, and, people are pretty used to gaffes from the last one. So this isn't going to be the end of the world if he has a few here or there.
No, Biden is a gaffe machine. That's one of the things I love about him, because he's honest.
It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And so when they wring their hands and they want to have him not answer questions, it's like, okay, calm down. Let's be adults and let the president be the president.
Yep.
And do your job in the White House and make the trains run, and that will make people out in the hinterland, happy with the presidency. So, yes, I love
the fact that he's Uncle Joe, who's going to on Labor Day show up at a union meeting, bring sandwiches, and call some guy's mother just to say hi. I love that about the guy. He's fine. I mean, he's fine.
He's done a couple gaffes that actually helped Obama out of some problems like the LGBTQ.
Yeah.
So history's shown that he's all right with it. I mean, he's not making the end of the world gaffes.
Nope.
And so I read with a little bit of disdain for the staff. Just calm down, take a chill pill. He'll be all right.
He'll be fine. Never once have I heard him say, drink bleach and shove a light up your behind.
Right. There you go. When he gets to that point, you can orchestrate him.
Then we can start talking. He comes up with some harebrained scheme like that, then we got problems. Until then,
there
you're right. He'll be fine.
Right. He'll be okay.
But I appreciate the time, Bob. Good stuff.
You. Oh, thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, I mean, I one of the things I like about him is he's authentic. And having met him a couple of times over the years, the same guy you get, on the press conferences, the guy you meet, in the ballroom having a drink. It's one of the things I like about him. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2011. That was the day hundreds of ILWU strikers blocked railroad tracks near Longview, Washington. They hoped to stop grain shipments from moving in and out of the EGT grain terminal. Longshoremen had been sitting down on the tracks throughout the summer, resulting in over 100 arrests. No trains had moved in or out of the terminal since July. But then a federal judge issued an injunction against ILWU pickets. The BNSF Railroad tried to move grain once again. ILWU picketers in Vancouver were able to hold off the train until police forcibly dispersed the crowd. Then, hundreds gathered at Longview to block the train from coming in. That's when police went on the offensive. They used clubs and pepper spray against the longshoremen, arresting 19. They threw ILWU President Bob McElrath to the ground. Rumors spread that police had broken his arm. Hundreds of regional longshoremen rushed to Longview. The Seattle and Tacoma ports shut down in protest. The next morning, 10,000 tons of grain were opened onto the railroad tracks. The grain export terminal was the first to be built in the Pacific Northwest in almost 30 years. EGT hoped to undercut the powerful ILWU, who controlled operations at the port since its founding in the 1930s. The union refused to agree to work 12-hour shifts at straight time. The EGT hoped to break the hiring hall by refusing to recognize maintenance and inside workers at the terminal. They then attempted to fill jobs with workers from the operating engineers, but the ILWU persevered. By the end of January, EGT had backed off many of its demands, negotiations resumed, and days later, the contract was signed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got some interesting and hopefully really great news from one of my really brilliant listeners, the guy who keeps me up to date on what's going on with the COVID breakouts and the predictions, spends lots of time working on models and honestly has been almost right spot on every step of the way. He sent me an article that could be something that would just be fantastic if we could do it. Evidently, there's some testing going on. According to this phys.org website, evidently they're claiming that there's a fridge-free COVID-19 vaccine that are grown in plants and bacteria. This, again, way over my head. But they have nano engineers, according to the story, at the University of California, San Diego, who have developed this vaccine that can take the heat. That's the thing. And if you can get this to places, around the world that desperately need it, because refrigeration is not something that you're going to be able to do, this could be a game changer globally. Now, obviously, the article says that they're testing it in mice right now. They want to make sure that it's safe and all that. But the fact that we're this far down the road of going, hey, we might be able to get something that is a little more stable, a little easier to get to some of the other places around the world, maybe even here in some of the places where, I don't know if you've been to parts of Appalachia. Work needs to be done. And I go back to, with the infrastructure, something we desperately need. Desperately. Which is why, as we were talking with Chris Hahn earlier, I talk to people all the time. Never hear anybody go, no, we can't spend that. We can't invest in that. No, never heard anybody tell me that. I've had some people say $3.5 trillion is a lot of money. And I go, yeah, it is, but we desperately need it. In fact, you go back to the American Society for Civil Engineers. They point out to get just our hard infrastructure up to date would take $4.6 trillion. We're only doing about a quarter of that with the 1.2. And you go, we need massive investments. We need to remake our social safety net that's been for the last 40 plus years assaulted at every level. The fact that you still have. It's mind-blowing to me that we can give billionaires massive tax breaks, that we can hand out trillions of dollars for war and for homeland security and things that have brought us nothing positive. And yet when we start talking about, hey, we should feed kids at lunchtime, people lose their freaking minds. Oh, you're going to get lazy. It's a slippery slope to socialism. When we start talking about making sure that we build things in this country and require manufacturing here, oh, you're infringing on capitalism. Well, maybe we need to. Maybe we need to do a bunch of stuff. Maybe we need to be doing it right now. Because I'll tell you, the way things are going, there's not a sunny light at the end of this tunnel. But I'm looking forward to what President Biden has to say on Thursday. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Be sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. Anywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. And if you find a place where we're not, let us know. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.